Okay, hello everybody. This is Yisrael Levitt here with Virtual Kollel, and I am joined here by an esteemed person here that's learning with me. So I'm very happy with that, and there might be some others that might be joining us. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to go through basically finishing off the Book of Ruth. And so just giving a little bit of an introduction in terms of what's happened up to this point, a little bit of the introduction to the book as well. So we'll tell the story here, try and shoot for like 5 minutes. So basically what it is there's an Israelite family who the patriarch is named Elimelech, and the matriarch is named Noemi. Okay. And there's a famine in the land of Israel. They go to the land of Moab to escape the famine. There's all kinds of intrigue and why they might have done that, so whether it's good or bad, maybe. But anyways, they have two sons, Machlon and Kilion, which are like really bad names, actually. It means sickness and destruction. So probably the Tanakh is giving them names that are not their actual names, but more descriptions of their character or personality, and they both die. And so then there are two Moabite, daughters-in-law. Then all the males die. Elimelech dies as well, the patriarch. So then the matriarch is left with two Moabite women. She's going to obviously go back to Yehuda, Bethlehem and Yehuda, Bethlehem and Yehuda. And so one of the girls decides to go with her, which is Ruth, of course, the book's namesake. And so what happens from there is sorry, I'm like trying to work on something here while I'm talking to everybody. So she goes back with Noemi, with her mother-in-law, and immediately they're destitute. So she decides that she's going to go pick from the gleanings of the harvest, even just the leftovers of the gleanings of the harvest, or I guess gleanings are the leftovers. I don't know. Anyways, whatever it is. And so just so happens, by hashgacha pratit, by divine providence, that she is in the field of a relative of Noemi. Okay, of the family of Noemi. And so the relative basically ostensibly takes them in, and takes them in the sense that he's supporting them by allowing Ruth to, he elevates her to one of the status of one of his workers, okay, rather than just a poor person there. And so she's quasi a worker, and she's able to do gleanings, and he says to give her extra gleanings and everything. She eats lunch there with everybody and everything like that, and gives her he dignifies her. Now there's one caveat to all this. The caveat, even though Boaz does such a great thing in allowing her to work the field, she's still working the field, just like kind of just like a hired hand, and he doesn't exactly take them in. So the question really is, why not? So why doesn't he do that? So we've dealt with that before in the past, but the fact that he doesn't do that gives Noemi the idea that she needs to take matter into her own hands. So basically, what she does, she tells Ruth, at least the way we're reading the text here in chapter 3, look, you're working for me and everything, helping to support me and everything. Well, why don't you just go get married? Go get a husband. So she basically sends her to go seduce him, right? The only thing is, that's where the whole book turns. The whole book turns because instead of seducing him, she tells him, she basically says, go el ata. Ki go el ata. 3 words. So the 3 words means, for you are our redeemer. Now, there's 3 halachot in the Torah that you have to know, and if you don't know them, you won't understand the book. Just plain and simple. So the first one is that, first, before even getting to the 3 halachot that are really main halachot, which most people knew, there's a Shemitah and a Yovel. So Shemitah is a sabbatical year, and then Yovel is a Jubilee year. Okay, so in each one of those days, that's each one of those time periods, I should say, debts are forgiven, and property reverts back to the original owners. Okay, all right, or there's at least an opportunity for the property to revert back to the owners. It doesn't automatically happen, and so the idea there creates a situation where you can have somebody who's a goel, who's a redeemer, right? Now let's go ahead and talk about the hierarchy, I guess you could say, of the 3 mitzvot that you need to know. The first one is called Yibum. So you have Yaakov and Leah, and Yaakov and Leah are married. Okay, and they don't have any male descendants or progeny at all. So no, not even a son-in-law. Obviously, no sons, etc. There's no males that are the next in line in that union. Okay, so Yaakov dies, and so Leah is left a widow. So what's supposed to happen is Yaakov's brother is supposed to marry her, right? It's called, I think they say like Levirate marriage, but I'm not exactly sure where that term Levirate comes from, but either way, is supposed to marry her to keep on the family name, as well as if there's any issue in terms of Yerusha, which is inheritance, or Geula, buying back property, then he has the opportunity then to go ahead and do that as a male. The lineage is traced through the male, etc. So the male also has the rights of inheritance and property rights and things like that. So that brings us to Goel. So a Goel is somebody that, let's say that Yaakov's brother, whatever his name, Shimon, whatever, Shimon decides not to marry Leah. Okay, then it goes to the next closest in line of familial relationships. So it could either be Shimon's brother who's still alive, or whatever the situation is. And so if it's not anybody's in the immediate family, then it goes to like extended family, etc. And so now we've talked also about there's if Shimon doesn't want to marry Leah, right, his brother's widow, there's something called chalitza, where the woman goes and takes off a shoe of the person who's responsible to marry her, and spits at him, and all. It's this whole crazy thing. But that's, I think, in my opinion, what's happening in uncovering Boaz's feet in chapter 3 is that Naomi is telling Ruth to allude to this process, because the idea of uncovered feet would be in the mind of somebody like, wedding rings. If you saw like a gold band, a pair of gold bands, on the dresser, you're like, oh, those are wedding rings. You know what I mean? And so like uncovering a person's foot is, definitely, a symbolic of that as well in the ancient Near Eastern mindset. Okay, so that's basically everything that happened. And so Ruth goes to Boaz, and instead of seducing him for her own, she says, Ki go elata, because you're our redeemer. And he says, well, you need to, let's press the pause button. There's actually a closer redeemer. And right, there's somebody who's closer, and so we have to give him the opportunity. And that's where we left off in chapter 4. So we're in verse 5. So now what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and take a look at those verses very quickly, and we'll carry on from there. So give me just a moment to... Oh, look at this. I wonder why it's like that. Okay. Don't know, but I'll take it. Okay. All right. So here we have the verses. Give me a second. Just like that. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and read them over very quickly. I'll just read them in English just to make it simple. Okay. So, and Boaz went to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz had spoken was passing. And he said, turn aside, sit down, so-and-so. And he turned aside and sat down. Now, very important, the guy is not named. We don't know what his name is. The text deliberately says, and John Doe passed by, right? So obviously he had a name, and Boaz is going to interact with him. And obviously Boaz called him by name, but the text doesn't, for whatever reason, and we'll explore maybe a little bit some of the reasons why, doesn't want to name him. Okay. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, sit down here. And they sat down. And he said to the near kinsman, Naomi, who has returned from the field of Moab, is selling the portion of the field that belonged to our brother Elimelech. Brother here, he means more the not specific sense, but more in the general sense, our kin, if you will. And I said, I will let you know. Hold on 1 second. I forgot to do something here. Give me just a moment. Okay, there we go. Is I will let you know I will let you know, saying, buy it in the presence of those who sit here and before the elders of my people. If you will redeem, redeem. And if you'll not redeem, tell me, and I will know. For there is no one besides you to redeem, and I am after you. So he's basically saying, look, if you want to buy the property, then that's great. Okay, you should buy the property. If not, let me know and I'll buy it. Okay, and he said, and he said, I will redeem. And that's kind of where we left off. Now, what is Boaz doing? Why doesn't now? It's something you have to know before going into the rest of the story. Is not only is he buying the property, he's buying he would be or redeeming. He'd be buying the things that are or acquiring, not necessarily buying, but he'd be acquiring everything that's attached to it. And who or what is attached to it? Ruth. Right, exactly. Now, why does he not say that? What possible reason? He's kind of deliberately leaving out like the main thing, it seems to me. Yeah, so he wants her to be redeemed, obviously, but why wouldn't he mention her? Okay, so maybe it's the idea that he wants to redeem her. No, no, I think there's something that's a little deeper than that, and I say deeper, not in the like kind of spiritual sense, but um, let me go ahead and see what tell you what I mean. Let's see here. Here we go. I had to think when I was typing. I'm like, oh yeah, that's the phrase I wanted to search. So I'm searching a phrase here from this really cool blog, by the way, or website, by the way, to everybody out in uh, who's watching me here. Um, and here's where I wanted to. Okay, and the tractate of Yavamot, which is the feminist version of Yibum, Yavama, right? Which we're talking a lot about Yibum, right? So there's a little bit of an intrigue here, and so there's a mitzvah from the Torah. Yes, there's a mitzvah from the Torah. This is what I wanted to read. That says an Ammonite. It says Ammoni u'Moavi Asurim v'Asurin Asur Olam. Says an Ammonite and a Moabite are forbidden to enter into the congregation of Israel, and their prohibition is forever. Okay, so that's the mitzvah in the Torah. So the Mishnah now is going to comment on that. The Mishnah says, Aval, here, I'll just read it all in English. However, their women are permitted immediately, and then it has in brackets following conversion, but we understand that they're obviously taking on the religion of the husband. The women are permitted immediately. Both male and female Egyptians and Edomites are forbidden only until the third generation. And then it says, Rabbi Shimon, Amar Rabbi Shimon, Kal v'chomer, hadavarim, uma'im, b'makum she'asur es zacharim, asur olam, heter es hanakevos miyad. And he says, this follows a fortiori, kal v'chomer, light from the heavy, right? If this, then therefore that kind of reasoning. He says, if in the case where males are forbidden forever, the females are nevertheless permitted immediately upon conversion. Then in the case where males are forbidden only until the third generation, how much more should females be permitted immediately upon conversion, and etc. So basically, I wanted to go ahead and read that because there's intrigue. And the Mishnah is hundreds and hundreds of years later than what's happening here. And so you can say that even in the times of the Mishnah, what are they doing? They're discussing whether Moabite women can be married or not. Okay. So then if you think about it, yes, I agree with you. Boaz wants to redeem Ruth, so he's kind of leaving her out of the story. But it seems that there's a further reason. This comes up specifically in the text in a moment. We'll see that he's leaving her out because it was very controversial. Because there are probably people, well, for sure there were people in that time period who said, no, you're not allowed to marry a Moabite. And we see this later on in the text with David, when they have certain, with like Doeg famously is, saying that he's not a valid king because he comes from Moabites, and so he's illegitimate to come into the congregation of Israel, etc. So that's one of the important pieces to know that, prohibition from the Torah. So now we're getting into verse 5. V'yomer Boaz b'yom kenosecha hasadeh miyad noami ume'es rus hamoavia eshes hames kenisa. So he says, on the day that you buy the field from the hand of Naomi and from Ruth the Moabitess, and it's not only just Ruth, it's Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the deceased, you have bought it. He says, the Hakim Shem Hames al Nachlasai, to preserve the name of the deceased on his heritage. So now, okay, so the guy says, oh, yep, he agrees, I'll redeem it. That sounds good. And so then, Boaz is like, but wait, there's more, type thing. And so all of a sudden he's saying, oh yeah, when you buy it from Naomi and Ruth the Moabite, then what's going to happen is you're going to obviously uphold the, let's see, why am I not showing anything from Rashi here? Give me a second. Does Rashi not have any comments right here? Oh, there we go. Okay. But anyways, so he's talking about the idea that, okay, oh, and there's a Moabite that's attached to it. So he just said, I'm going to redeem it. And he's like, okay, great. So yeah, there's a Moabite woman who's attached to it. And he's like, gulp, you know what I mean? Type of situation. What's happening? Why did this go to chapter 3? Okay, sorry here for the technical difficulties. Let's show Rashi's commentary. God willing, we'll end like a little bit, maybe 10 minutes beforehand. So we'll go for like another 10 minutes, and God willing, we'll get to finish through some of the chapter, hopefully most of the chapter here. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, perfect. All right. Yeah. So Rashi, what he says, he basically says, so why does he add and from Ruth the Moabitess, or what is he saying by that? He says you must buy, and she agrees only if you marry her. It's kind of the, it's a package deal, And Vayomer HaGoel, so the Goel says, Lo uchal ligal. Okay. Excuse me, ligal li pen ashchis es nachlasi. He says, I can't redeem it for myself lest I mar my heritage. And he says, you redeem my redemption for yourself. I cannot redeem it. So Rashi comments on this whole idea, lest I mar my heritage. Okay, so what's going on? And he says, my offspring. Okay, so he says, my heritage, nachlasi, because technically he says nachlasi is like my portion. Okay, and so he says, Rashi specifically says, no, he means his offspring. And so then he quotes a psalm. Behold, the heritage of the Lord is sons. Okay, to give my offspring a stigma, as it is said, an Ammonite and Moabite shall not enter the congregation of the Lord. But he erred by not interpreting it as an Ammonite, but not an Ammonitis, right? A Moabite and not a Moabitis, And so what's happening here is he basically says, look, I can't do it, because he's like, the prohibition, right? Kind of thing. What are people going to say? I'm not going to be able to marry off my kids. It's kind of ostensibly the idea. And so verse 7 says, Zos lefanim b'Yisrael al hageulah v'al Tumur l'kayim kol davar shalaf ish na'alei v'nasan l're'ehu uzois ha'teuda b'Yisrael. You guys are more than welcome to come and to sit and learn. We're going through chapter 4. We're right in about the middle. So now this is the custom in former times in Israel concerning redemption and exchange. To confirm anything, one would remove his shoe and give it to his fellow, and this was the attestation in Israel. So now we have the commentator who's coming in, and it's just telling us about an ancient practice that even at the publishing of this Megillah is no longer ostensibly practiced. And so concerning redemption, Rashi says this is a sale, and exchange, he says this is an exchange. Okay, I need to see it in Hebrew. Give me a moment here. Let me see. Well, okay, so there's something called chilpon, and chilpon is basically this. It's a halachic idea that when you make a contract, there has to have something that's physical that's exchanged. Okay, so that's that whole idea of a ring. You wonder where like giving a ring, where did that come from in marriage? It comes from us. It comes from Jews, right? It comes from Judaism, because the ring, in order to marry somebody, you have to give them something in exchange as a kinyan, as an acquisition. So it's not like you're buying the person, but it's an exchange in terms of a sale, meaning that you acquire something. So like the idea, for instance, is, when do you actually acquire something? When you're in a store. So for us, according to our law, the acquisition is when you exchange in currency. But really, the acquisition, according to Jewish law, is when you pick it up. Okay, and how do we know this for sure? So how do we know this for sure? What's shoplifting? What's called shoplifting? When are you shoplifting and when are you not shoplifting? So let's say, huh? Exactly, when you walk out the store. So the idea is that when you acquire something, when you lift it up and you take it with you, that's called an acquisition. And so the idea here is just that's the whole idea of the shoe. And verse 7 is just giving that background. Rashi says this is an acquisition. This is an act of acquisition, as we acquire title with a scarf in lieu of a shoe. And the rabbis of blessed memory differed on this matter. Who gave the shoe to whom? So that's the other issue. Did Boaz give his shoe to so and so, or did so and so take his shoe and give it to Boaz? We don't know. It's a machloket. It's a debate in the Talmud. Some say that we perform the act of acquisition with the utensil of the acquirer, and Boaz gave the shoe to the redeemer. And others say that we perform that act of acquisition with the utensil of the seller, and the redeemer gave the shoe to Boaz. And this was the attestation in Israel, the law of testimony. And so now going on, V'yomer hagoel leVoaz kanei loch ve'yishlof na'alei. And so the near kinsman said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, and he removed his shoe. So who's he and who's his? So he removed his shoe. Well, is that Boaz removed his shoe and gave it to so and so? So that's the intrigue right there. And V'yomer Boaz l'zakenim b'chol ha'am eidim atem hayom. He says, Boaz said to the elders and the entire people, you are witnesses today. Ki kinisi es kol asher leElimelech ve'es kol asher lechilion leMachlon miyad Naomi. And he says that I bought all that was Elimelech. Elimelech was all the way back to the beginning, was the patriarch of the family, and all that was Chilions and Machlons from Naomi. Chilion and Machlon obviously were the sons. Verse 10. V'gamis Rus HaMoaviyah Eshes Machlon. So now finally we know which one of the sons Ruth was married to. So she was married to Machlon, which was the older son, which might have also in turn told us why she was the one that felt such an attachment to Naomi, being that she was, the older son. And Kanisi li leisha lahakim shem hames al nachlasei. And I've acquired her for myself as a wife to preserve the name of the deceased on his inheritance, on his heritage. V'lo yikares as shem hames me'im achav u'mishar mekamei edem atem hayay. And so that the name of the deceased not be obliterated from his brethren, and from the gate of his place, you are witnesses today. And so Rashi wants to clarify. He says, since his wife comes and goes on the estate and brings in and takes out, people say this is Machlon's wife, and his name is remembered upon it. So that's like the idea of like the restoring, or the keeping things alive. Okay, so I want to get to. Okay, hold on one second. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and end with the next couple of verses here, and then we'll pick it up, God willing, on Shabbat morning, obviously, with our viewers in the recording. I'll go ahead and record it a little bit later on today, the balance of the chapter. El Biseicha Kirachel Uchaleya. And all the people who were in the gates and the elders replied, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is entering your house like Rachel and Leah, and like Leah." Why is this important? Why is this odd that they're saying that blessing? So Rachel and Leah had the same husband, okay, but why is it odd that they would be mentioning Rachel? Where are they? Which tribal area are they in? They're in Bethlehem of Judah. So they're in the tribal area of Yehuda. Yehuda is the son of which one, Rachel or Leah? Yeah, is Leah's son. Why are they mentioning Rachel in their tribal blessing? So it's really interesting because it seems that even in this, like, that, and you have to remember, like at this time, there were more like city states, than a nation, and so even in this territory, which is the territory of Judah, which has no connection to Rachel at all, right? They're still recognizing that Rachel was the main wife of Yaakov. And the issue is even further, actually on the opposite side. Why are they mentioning Leah? Well, they're mentioning Leah, of course, because that's their ancestor, their what do you call it? Their matriarch, right? But it's really interesting because this is one of the only two times that Leah is mentioned outside of the Torah. The other one is Divrei Hayamim in Chronicles, where it gives a lineage. So she just mentioned. So ostensibly, outside of a lineage, this is the only other place in the Torah that Leah is mentioned. Only other place in the Tanakh outside the Torah she's mentioned. And both of whom built up the house of Israel. And Asay Chayil be'Ephrasa ukarashem beveis lechem, and prosper in Ephrata and be famous in Beit Lechem. As we're translating here, Ephrata and Beit Lechem are the same, or they're two different names for the same city. So this is obviously something that's very poetic. Rashi basically says, literally, and call a name, i.e., may your name become great. Vayhi v'secha keves peretz asher yalda samar liuda min hazera asher yiten Hashem lecha min hana'ara hazais. And so, and may your house be like the house of Peretz, whom Tamar bore to Judah with the seed that the Lord will give you from his maiden. And so Peretz, why Peretz? Because as we'll see at the end of the chapter, tomorrow, that she's descended from Peretz. So that's actually everybody here is descended from Peretz. But also there's another further intrigue. Okay, so this whole story mirrors another story. What's the other story that it mirrors, or that it parallels, I should say? The story of Yehuda and Tamar. What happened in the story of Yehuda and Tamar? Yehuda has two sons, all right, just like Elimelech had two sons, right? One of them married a foreign wife, who's Tamar, right? Just like the Machlon married a foreign wife, Ruth, right? And the first son died, died. So then Onan did Yibum. He did a levirate marriage. He didn't consummate the marriage. He was punished. He was punished by Hashem. He died. And so then what? There's a third son who's supposed to obviously take over and do the Yibum as well. He doesn't. So what does Tamar do? She takes matters in her own hands, seduces Yehuda. So basically parallel stories. You have Yibum. You have a woman taking matters into her own hands and seducing a man, etc. But interestingly enough, where Tamar ostensibly did something that, obviously, she used whatever power that she had, which obviously were her womanly wiles, as you will, because she was an aguna. She was trapped. She was trapped to wait for She'alah, to wait for Yehuda's third son. And when Yehuda didn't give She'alah to her in marriage, she's like, look, I'm sitting here waiting years and years for this guy to grow up to marry me. And all of a sudden, I'm seeing that this is not going to happen. What am I supposed to do? I'm trapped, right? And so she obviously takes matters into her own hands, not necessarily in the best way, we'll say. Obviously, she's, by deception, things like that. But then look at what Ruth does. Ruth, almost as if she's coming to complete the story, she makes she makes a tikkun, she makes a reparation on Tamar's like further actions, and she says what? Instead of seducing Boaz, she says ki go elata, and she's like, hey, let's play by the rules. You're our goel, so what you should do is you should redeem us. Instead of her like being greedy and saying, okay, I just need a husband. Excuse me, I don't want to take care of Naomi anymore. She's an old woman. She could fend for herself. I need to start a life. I need to start a life, over again. I need to have children, whatever it is, right? Because obviously she's barren, or she's hasn't had children up to this point with her former husband, right? What does she do? She says, no, I want to do things according to the laws of the Torah. So I'll say ki goelata. And let's go through that whole procedure. That like initiates another procedure, which is a whole Torah procedure, and she doesn't know what's going to happen, but that's basically, instead of taking matters into her own hands that way, like Naomi wanted her to, she said, no, we're going to follow the Torah, which is very interesting. That Ruth, the Moabite, one who took on the religion of Naomi, of the Jewish people, is almost follows the Torah more than Naomi does, almost. But it's really interesting that she's the one to come to make a tikkun for, the ancestor Tamar's, we'll say, maybe not so much actions, that she really shouldn't have maybe done. And, so we see that the root over and over again is just a paragon of virtue, and, somebody to, model after. So anyways, thank you everybody for joining us. Tomorrow is a Shabbat, so have a great Shabbat if you're listening to this live, or you're listening to this on the same day it's recorded. And God willing, we should all be able to learn the Book of Ruth with Ruth's great grandson, the Mashiach Tzidkenu, a righteous Messiah. Everybody said amen. Hopefully he will come very soon.
So was Tamara from the same line